I just try to be a role model, and when I see Hispanics that look up to me, I try to lead them in the right direction.
He had it all: fame, fortune, a Super Bowl ring within reach. But Aaron Hernandez was living two lives, and when those worlds collided, three men would end up dead. An NFL career would be destroyed, and the truth about what was happening inside his brain would shock the world. The making of a monster. To understand Aaron Hernandez, you have to start in Bristol, Connecticut, a working-class town where Friday night lights weren't just entertainment, they were everything. This was the kind of place where high school football games brought the entire community together, where a star athlete wasn't just admired, but revered, where sports excellence could be your ticket out of a modest life. And Aaron Hernandez was born into this world on November 6, 1989, as the son of Dennis and Terry Hernandez. His father, Dennis, wasn't just any proud dad in the stands. He was a former football star himself, having played at Bristol Central High School and later at the University of Connecticut. He had such a bright future and always seemed so ordinary in interviews and during games.
What you guys have in store for us this season?
Well, I don't think I could tell you much about that, but we picked up a few players that could make some plays, offense and defense, and take it like every other year, have a big goal, make that big game, and try to win it all.
But Dennis Hernandez was more than just a supportive parent cheering from the sidelines. According to investigations by the Boston Globe, Dennis was an intensely demanding father who ruled his household with an iron fist, and tragically, with his fists themselves. The dynamic in the Hernandez home was simple and brutal. Excel at sports, and you earned your father's love and approval. Fail on the field, and you faced not just disappointment, but physical punishment. This wasn't the occasionally stern father pushing his kids to be their best. This was systematic abuse that taught young Aaron a devastating lesson. Love was conditional, safety was never guaranteed, and violence was an acceptable response to failure. Aaron and his older brother Jonathan learned quickly that athletic performance wasn't just about trophies or scholarships, it was about survival in their own home. They became exceptional athletes, not just because they had talent, but because they were terrified of what would happen if they weren't. And while this kind of toxic, abusive motivation did produce results on the field, it was simultaneously destroying Aaron's psychological foundation, teaching him that worth was measured only in wins and losses, that emotions were weaknesses to be suppressed, and that physical dominance was how you maintained control. Making matters even more complicated, there have been persistent reports from Aaron's high school years suggesting he was struggling with his sexual identity. According to former classmates who spoke to various media outlets after his death, Aaron may have had a boyfriend during high school, but was absolutely terrified that his father would discover this secret. Imagine being a teenage boy in a hyper-masculine environment like high school football, where homophobia was rampant and showing any sign of weakness could make you a target. Now imagine that on top of the normal pressures of being a closeted teenager, you have a father who has already proven he'll use violence to enforce his expectations. The psychological pressure Aaron must have felt, the constant fear of discovery, the shame internalized from both society and family, the necessity of maintaining a straight facade while your true self remains hidden would have been absolutely crushing. During these formative years, Aaron learned to compartmentalize, to build walls between different parts of his identity. There was the Aaron that excelled on the football field, the Aaron his father wanted him to be. There was the private Aaron, struggling with questions about his sexuality and identity. And there was the traumatized Aaron, carrying the weight of abuse and trying to process it without any help or support. These weren't healthy boundaries. They were survival mechanisms that would later manifest in devastating ways. Then, on January 6, 2006, when Aaron was just 16 years old and in his senior year of high school, everything changed. Dennis Hernandez went in for what should have been a routine hernia surgery, the kind of procedure performed thousands of times every day across America without incident. But something went catastrophically wrong. Dennis died from complications related to the surgery, and in an instant, Aaron lost the man who had been simultaneously his greatest tormentor and his biggest champion. The situation at home became even more chaotic and confusing after Dennis's death. Terry Hernandez, Aaron's mother, began dating her niece's husband, essentially Aaron's older cousin's spouse. This wasn't just unconventional. It created an incredibly awkward and unstable family dynamic. Aaron eventually moved in with his mother and her new boyfriend, creating a living situation where his sense of belonging and family identity became even more fractured. He was living with someone who was technically family but felt like an intruder, in a house where his place was never quite clear, watching his mother move on while he was still drowning in unprocessed grief. Despite all this chaos in his personal life, or perhaps because of it, because sports remained the one place where Aaron felt in control and valued, his athletic talent continued to flourish. He graduated from Bristol Central High School as one of the most sought-after recruits in the nation, and in January 2007, he enrolled at the University of Florida. This wasn't just any college program. This was the Florida Gators, under head coach Urban Meyer, a program that was simultaneously pursuing and winning national championships. Aaron joined a team that featured Tim Tebow at quarterback, one of the most famous college athletes of his generation. The Gators were a powerhouse, and Aaron's talent was immediately apparent. As a freshman in 2007, he caught 34 passes for 381 yards. Solid numbers for a first-year player learning the college game, but it was in 2008, his sophomore season, where Aaron truly broke out. He caught 68 passes for 850 yards and 5 touchdowns, setting school records for receptions and receiving yards by a tight end. His performance earned him first-team All-SEC honors and helped the Gators win the 2008 BCS National Championship. At just 19 years old, Aaron Hernandez was a national champion, one of the best tight ends in college football, and seemingly destined for NFL stardom. But even as Aaron was achieving unprecedented success on the field, there were warning signs that something was deeply wrong. According to ESPN's detailed investigation into his Florida years, Aaron failed multiple NCAA drug tests for marijuana and cocaine. In a normal situation, these failed tests should have resulted in suspensions, maybe even dismissal from the team. But Urban Meyer, who was building a championship dynasty, reportedly kept Aaron eligible by covering for him, by minimizing the violations, by prioritizing wins over addressing a young man's obvious struggles with substance abuse. The drug use wasn't recreational partying, it was self-medication. Aaron was trying to numb the psychological pain he'd been carrying since childhood, to quiet the voices in his head that told him he wasn't good enough, to escape from the memories of abuse and the grief of losing his father. But instead of getting help, instead of addressing the underlying trauma, Aaron was learning another destructive lesson. If you're talented enough, people will look the other way. If you're valuable enough, your problems don't matter. This was a dangerous message for a young man who already had trouble distinguishing between right and wrong, who had learned from his father that violence was acceptable, who was carrying unprocessed trauma from intimate misconduct.
He was taking it very seriously, and he's like, not just yelling at Little League umpires. According to investigations from the Boston Globe, he would physically abuse both Aaron and his older brother.
There were other warning signs too. Aaron was deeply affiliated with the Bristol Bloods, a Connecticut street gang. He had blood tattooed on his hand and was known to flash gang signs, even in team photos. This wasn't a casual connection or youthful rebellion. This was a genuine affiliation with violent criminals, a connection that would later prove fatal. By the time Aaron left Florida after his junior year to enter the NFL draft, he was one of the most physically gifted tight ends in the country. But he was also a deeply troubled young man carrying extraordinary psychological baggage, with untreated trauma, unaddressed substance abuse issues, active gang connections, and a learned pattern of compartmentalizing his life into separate, conflicting identities. In the 2010 NFL Draft, Aaron Hernandez was selected in the 4th round, 113th overall, by the New England Patriots. The fact that a player of his obvious talent fell to the 4th round should have been a massive red flag. NFL teams knew about his failed drug tests, knew about his questionable associations, knew there were character concerns. But the Patriots, under the leadership of Bill Belichick, had built a reputation for taking chances on talented but troubled players, believing they could control them, reform them, or at least contain them long enough to extract value on the field. By 2012, Aaron seemed to have reached the pinnacle of success. He signed a 5-year contract extension worth $40 million, an enormous sum that secured his financial future and seemed to validate all the talent and hard work. He appeared in Super Bowl XLVI, though the Patriots lost to the New York Giants. He was engaged to his high school sweetheart, Cheyenne Jenkins, and they had a daughter together. From the outside, Aaron Hernandez had achieved the American dream. A kid from a tough background who made it to the NFL, earned millions, started a family, and competed for championships. This dual existence couldn't last. The two worlds were on a collision course, and when they finally crashed together, the explosion would destroy everything Aaron had built, and multiple lives, and expose secrets that shocked everyone who thought they knew him. The murders and the unraveling. Before we can understand Aaron Hernandez's ultimate downfall, we need to go back to July 16, 2012, a night that would haunt Aaron for the rest of his short life and end in tragedy for two innocent men who had no idea they were crossing paths with a paranoid, dangerous individual. Aaron was at Cure Lounge in Boston, a nightclub where he'd gone to blow off steam. But Aaron wasn't just casually drinking that night. According to later testimony from his associate Alexander Bradley, Aaron was high on PCP, a powerful hallucinogenic drug known for inducing paranoia and violent behavior. In this altered state, something trivial happened. Daniel Deabro accidentally bumped into Aaron and spilled a drink on him. In any normal circumstance, this would be a minor annoyance, maybe worthy of a "watch where you're going" comment before everyone moved on with their night. But Aaron wasn't normal, and his perception of reality was distorted by drugs and untreated psychological issues. In Aaron's paranoid mind, this accidental bump wasn't an accident at all. It was disrespect, a challenge to his status, maybe even a deliberate provocation. He became fixated on Deabro and his group of friends as they left the club. According to the indictment filed by Suffolk County prosecutors, Aaron got into a silver SUV and followed Deabro's group to their car, a BMW carrying Deabro, his friend Safiro Furtado, and 3 others. What happened next was cold-blooded murder. As the BMW stopped at a red light, Aaron's SUV pulled up alongside it. Aaron, armed with a .38 caliber handgun, fired 5 rounds into the vehicle. Daniel Deabro and Safiro Furtado were killed instantly. Another passenger was wounded but survived. The BMW crashed, and Aaron drove away from the scene, leaving 2 men dead over something as meaningless as a spilled drink. This wasn't a crime of passion or a fight that escalated. This was premeditated murder. Aaron had to follow them, had to get a gun, had to pull up next to their car, and had to make the conscious decision to pull the trigger 5 times. Each shot was a choice, and he made that choice 5 times in a row. And then he went home, presumably to his fiancée and his comfortable life as an NFL player, as if nothing had happened. The Boston police investigated the double homicide, but without witnesses willing to come forward and with limited physical evidence, the case went cold. Aaron had gotten away with murder, or so it seemed. But crimes like this don't exist in isolation. They're part of a pattern, and Aaron's pattern was only escalating. By early 2013, Aaron's relationship with Alexander Bradley had become strained. Bradley was more than just a friend. He was Aaron's drug supplier and had been present during some of Aaron's most compromising moments, including potentially the Boston double murder. And when you're an NFL player who's committed serious crimes, people who know your secrets become liabilities. In February 2013, Aaron and Bradley took a trip to Florida.
Alexander Bradley testified about guns and drugs. He also talked about his friendship with Aaron Hernandez. He said the two were close enough that Hernandez asked him to be the godfather of Hernandez's child.
According to Bradley's later testimony and police records, the 2 men got into an argument. Reports vary on the exact cause, with some sources suggesting it was over splitting a tab at a strip club, while others indicate it was Bradley knowing too much about Aaron's violent activities. Whatever the specific trigger, the result was attempted murder. Aaron shot Bradley in the face, destroying his right eye and leaving him for dead in an industrial park. The fact that Bradley survived was remarkable, and even more remarkable was his initial decision to stay silent about what happened. When police found him bleeding from a gunshot wound to the head, Bradley initially refused to cooperate or identify his attacker. This wasn't loyalty, it was fear. Bradley knew what Aaron was capable of, and he knew that if he cooperated with police, Aaron might finish the job. But Bradley's silence wouldn't last forever, and Aaron's paranoia about what Bradley knew would have devastating consequences. The attempt to silence a witness hadn't worked. It had only created another loose end, another person who could potentially destroy Aaron's carefully constructed public image. In June 2013, Aaron Hernandez's double life was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. He was still playing for the Patriots, still appearing in public as a successful athlete, but privately, he was unraveling. The paranoia was intensifying. The drug use was escalating, and his connections to the criminal underworld were becoming harder to hide. Enter Odin Lloyd, a 27-year-old semi-professional football player who was dating Shayana Jenkins' sister. This meant Lloyd had a direct connection to Aaron's family and inner circle. He wasn't some random person, but someone who was becoming increasingly involved in Aaron's personal life. And, according to prosecutors, that closeness became a problem when Lloyd attended a Boston nightclub with Aaron and witnessed something he shouldn't have, possibly a confrontation with rivals or some other incident that Aaron feared Lloyd might discuss with the wrong people. On June 17, 2013, Aaron decided Odin Lloyd had become too great a liability. The plan was methodical and chilling in its cold calculation. Around 2:10 a.m., Aaron texted Lloyd, "You good? Come through." This simple text message would be one of the key pieces of evidence proving Aaron's involvement. It established that Aaron was actively reaching out to Lloyd, luring preparing him to what would be his death. Aaron picked up Lloyd along with his two associates, Carlos Ortiz and Ernest Wallace. Surveillance footage captured from Aaron's home security system and various businesses in the area created a timeline that prosecutors would later use to devastating effect. The four men got into a silver Nissan Altima that Aaron had rented, and they drove to an industrial park in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, less than a mile from Aaron's own home. At approximately 3:23 a.m., Lloyd sent a final text message to his sister, NFL. Just so you know, those would be his last words to anyone. Moments later, in that dark industrial park, Odin Lloyd was shot multiple times at close range with a .45 caliber Glock handgun. His body was found later that morning by a jogger, lying in the grass with 5 bullet wounds. But Aaron had made critical mistakes that would lead investigators directly to him. At 3:29 a.m., his home security system captured him returning to his house, holding what appeared to be a Glock 45 handgun. Shell casings found at the crime scene matched casings found in the rental car and in Aaron's home. Tire tracks at the scene matched the distinctive Michelin tires on Aaron's Toyota 4Runner, and perhaps most damning, investigators found a piece of blue Publicious bubblegum at the crime scene with Aaron's DNA on it. The evidence was overwhelming, and even Aaron's considerable resources and legal team couldn't explain it away. On June 26, 2013, just 9 days after Odin Lloyd's murder, police arrested Aaron Hernandez and charged him with first-degree murder and 5 firearms violations. Within hours, the New England Patriots released him, erasing the $40 million contract that should have secured his future. His NFL career was over at age 23. The fall from grace was spectacular and swift. One day, Aaron was a wealthy NFL player with a Super Bowl ring within reach. The next, he was inmate about 174594 at the Bristol County House of Correction, facing life in prison. All those years of compartmentalization, of living a double life, of believing he was untouchable because of his fame and talent. It all came crashing down in a matter of days. The final days and haunting legacy. Life at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center was a stark contrast to the life Aaron had known as an NFL star. No more sold-out stadiums, no more adoring fans, no more million-dollar paychecks. Instead, Aaron spent most of his time in a 7x12-foot cell, isolated from the general population for his own safety. Former professional athletes in prison are targets, both because of their fame and because of the perceived weakness that comes from falling so far. Aaron's prison records reveal a pattern of violent behavior and disciplinary issues. He was involved in altercations with other inmates, leading to 30 days in segregation in 2015. In 2016, he threatened to kill a corrections officer, which resulted in him being placed on high-risk watch. This wasn't just adjustment difficulty or the understandable frustration of imprisonment. This was continued violence and lack of impulse control, the same patterns that had led him to prison in the first place. But Aaron's most profound struggle in prison wasn't with other inmates or guards. It was with his own identity. Reports emerged after his death, including detailed investigation by the Netflix documentary Killer Inside: The Mind of Aaron Hernandez, that Aaron had been involved in romantic relationships with male inmates. The Massachusetts Department of Correction visitor logs released in 2025 confirmed that Aaron had regular visits with an inmate named Kyle Kennedy, including what the logs described as conjugal visits approved under DOC policy. After Aaron's death, 3 suicide notes were found in his cell. One was addressed to his fiancée Shayana, one to his young daughter Avielle, and one to Kyle Kennedy. The letter to Kennedy, portions of which were released in 2025, was romantic in nature, suggesting a deep emotional connection. In an interview after the letter's release, Kennedy stated, "He said he'd rather die than live without me." This revelation adds another layer of tragedy to Aaron's story. Here was a man who had spent his entire life hiding fundamental aspects of his identity, who had grown up in an environment where being gay would have been seen as the ultimate weakness, who had a father that likely would have responded with violence if he'd known the truth. Even in prison, even after losing everything else, Aaron was still compartmentalizing, still keeping secrets, still unable to fully integrate all the different parts of himself into one honest existence. On April 18, 2017, Aaron made several phone calls to his family members. He spoke with his mother, Terry, and according to the DOC incident report, he told her, "I'm ready to come home." He called Shayana and discussed post-release plans, saying, "I'm good, babe. When I get out, we're getting married." To outsiders listening to these calls, Aaron seemed upbeat, even optimistic. There was no indication of suicidal ideation, no warning signs that he was planning to end his life in just a few hours. But at 3:05 a.m. on April 19, 2017, corrections officers discovered Aaron Hernandez hanged in his cell. He had used a bedsheet tied to the window bar to hang himself, and he had jammed cardboard in the door track and placed his mattress against the door to delay discovery. The positioning of his body, with his knees bent and feet touching the floor, suggested he had deliberately strangled himself rather than dropping from a height, which would have been quicker, but also more easily survivable if discovered early. The scene in Aaron's cell was surreal and disturbing. On the wall, written in red marker, were various symbols and phrases: Illuminati, a pyramid with an all-seeing eye, and God forgives. On Aaron's forehead, also in red marker, were the words John 3:16. His Bible was open to that same verse, underlined in red. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. The autopsy revealed no drugs in his system, suggesting this was a fully conscious decision made while Aaron was completely aware of what he was doing. The 3 suicide notes confirmed this wasn't an impulsive act. He had planned this, prepared for it, and executed it with the same methodical approach he'd once brought to football. The note to Shayana read in part, "Shay, you're my soul. I never wanted this life for us. Tell Aviel her daddy tried. I'm free now." To his daughter, who was only 4 years old, "Daddy's angel. Be strong. Never let them break you. I love you to the stars." And to Kyle Kennedy, "You were the only one who saw me, not the monster. I'm coming to you. Wait for me." At 4:12 a.m., corrections officials notified Shayana of Aaron's death. The 911 call she placed shortly after was heartbreaking. "They just called me. Aaron, he's gone. He hung himself. Oh God. He left a note for our baby. I can't breathe." You can hear in her voice not just grief, but confusion, disbelief that the man she'd loved since high school, the father of her child, had chosen to leave them this way. Aaron Hernandez was pronounced dead at age 27, leaving behind a 3-year-old daughter who would grow up knowing her father only through stories, news articles, and documentaries about his crimes. Aaron's death created an unusual legal situation. Under a Massachusetts legal doctrine called abatement ab initio, when someone dies before their appeals process is complete, their conviction is vacated as if it never happened. This archaic doctrine, dating back to English common law, was based on the idea that defendants have a right to a full appeals process, and if they die before exercising that right, the conviction shouldn't stand. In May 2017, Aaron's murder conviction for killing Odin Lloyd was vacated under this doctrine. Suddenly, in the eyes of the law, Aaron Hernandez had never been convicted of murder. This was devastating for Odin Lloyd's family, who had waited years for justice, only to see it erased by a legal technicality. It also had implications for potential civil lawsuits, as Shayana and Aaron's daughter could now potentially inherit more from his estate if he wasn't legally a convicted murderer. However, in March 2019, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court abolished the abatement ab initio doctrine and unanimously reinstated Aaron's conviction. The court ruled that the doctrine was outdated and unjust, that a defendant's death shouldn't erase a jury's verdict and all the work that went into achieving justice. This decision brought some closure to the Lloyd family, even though Aaron himself would never face the consequences of his conviction beyond the time he'd already served. In 2017, Aaron's family filed a lawsuit against the NFL and the New England Patriots seeking $20 million in damages, arguing that the organizations knew about the dangers of CTE, but failed to protect players or adequately inform them of the risks. The lawsuit alleged that if Aaron had known the extent of brain damage he was accumulating, he might have retired earlier, might have sought treatment, might have made different choices. The NFL fought the lawsuit vigorously, as they have with hundreds of similar cases. But in September 2022, the parties reached a settlement for $1.2 million, with the money placed in a trust fund for Aaron's daughter Aviel's education and care. It was a fraction of what the family had sought, but it acknowledged some degree of responsibility for what happened to Aaron. In October 2025, Shayana Jenkins filed a new lawsuit against the Massachusetts Department of Correction, alleging negligent suicide prevention. The lawsuit argues that given Aaron's recent acquittal in the double murder case, his young daughter, and the positive tone of his recent phone calls, corrections officials should have recognized he was at risk and taken preventative measures. Kyle Kennedy, Aaron's prison partner, also filed a civil suit seeking $500,000 from Aaron's estate for emotional damages related to his death. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.